The second hand of the wall clock seemed to hammer against my temples, marking a frantic rhythm that contrasted sharply with the absolute stillness of the classroom. We were at the climax of the final exam, that moment when the future hangs in the balance with the stroke of a pen, when Ms. Jacobs' voice sliced through the air like a whip. With a calmness more terrifying than any shout, she announced that the privacy of our devices had been compromised. A spy camera, secretly installed on one of our laptops, had been watching us. The threat was a punch to the gut. If the culprit behind the detected irregularities didn't come forward, collective expulsion would be the only verdict. In that instant, the classroom ceased to be a place of learning and became a pressure cooker of paranoia. I watched the reactions of those around me, trying to read the guilt in the sweat on their brows. Anna, always so self-assured, stared blankly into space, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly on the keyboard. Kevin, our computer whiz, stared at his own screen with a mixture of horror and fascination, as if expecting to see a digital eye staring back at him from the other side of the glass. No one dared breathe normally. The fear that any sudden movement would be interpreted as a tacit confession kept us all in a state of near catatonic rigidity. Mistrust, that silent poison, began to seep through the cracks of our camaraderie. The tension reached its breaking point when Francis, the boy who always walked the fine line between rebellion and order, stood up with a bang that echoed off the bare walls. His proposal was an invitation to social cannibalism. If no one confessed, we should put the fate of the class to a vote. She wanted us to point the finger at someone, to sacrifice a head to save the rest of the body. The most unsettling thing wasn't Francis's suggestion, but Mrs. Jacobs's reaction. She bowed her head, her thoughtful expression sending chills down my spine, and agreed. She gave us exactly 2 minutes to decide as a group, warning us that a mistake in our choice would have devastating consequences for everyone. The classroom erupted in a cauldron of desperate whispers. I moved between the desks, trying to find some logic that would allow us to get out of this mess. Anna intercepted me, grabbing my arm with a force that betrayed her panic. She whispered in my ear that Francis was the obvious culprit, that his recent rise in grades was nothing more than the result of systematic deception. Meanwhile, Kevin was trying to convince me that it was all a technological bluff, a psychological interrogation tactic designed to break someone under the pressure of the group. But while they argued about theories and probabilities, my eyes drifted to the back of the room, where Gerald slumped in his seat, burying his face in his hands, sobbing desperately. Sitting down beside him, reality hit me with a physical force. Gerald, the quietest and most selfless student I knew, looked up, his eyes red and blurred with tears. In a whisper, he confessed that the camera hadn't lied. He had searched for answers on his phone. But his crime didn't stem from laziness, but from pure desperation. His mother had suffered a critical seizure the night before, and he had spent the early hours awake, wandering hospital corridors and the smell of antiseptic. He hadn't had a minute to open a book, and the possibility of losing his scholarship, the only thing guaranteeing his mother's medical treatment, had pushed him to the brink of deception. Gerald wasn't a cheat by nature. He was a desperate son trying to keep afloat what little family he had left. Time was running out, and Mrs. Jacobs stood up, demanding our final decision. Silence returned, but this time it was different. It was heavy with the weight of Gerald's life on my shoulders. I heard some classmates, driven by the instinct for survival, begin to murmur Francis's name, wanting to believe the easiest version to save their own careers. I felt Gerald's gaze on the back of my neck, a silent plea that tore at my soul. I stood up, but the words caught in my throat. I knew that if I spoke, I would save the class but destroy a good man. If I remained silent, we risked losing everything. I chose silence, a solidarity silence that, to my surprise, began to spread throughout the rest of the room. When the teacher asked for the last time who was responsible, no one pointed to Gerald. There was confusion, names thrown around randomly, and a lot of hesitation, but a consensus of guilt on a single person never materialized. It was then that Mrs. Jacobs did something no one expected. She smiled in an almost maternal way, an expression that completely shattered the image of a tyrannical figure we had constructed of her. She asked Gerald to stand and, to our astonishment, revealed that it had all been a perfectly coordinated charade. Gerald hadn't committed actual fraud. He was her accomplice in a lesson that wasn't in any textbook. The real test wasn't about academic knowledge, but about integrity, loyalty, and the ability to discern between the rule and humanity. The camera never existed, but our reaction to the crisis was very real. The teacher explained that in the professional world, the temptation to sacrifice others for personal gain is constant, and that today we had demonstrated that the value of a classmate is greater than the fear of punishment. Gerald, wiping away the last of his tears, allowed himself to smile for the first time in days. We left that classroom with the exam passed, but above all, with the understanding that loyalty is the only grade that truly matters when pressure tries to break us.